Today we're continuing our discussion of cellular processes, and today we're going to talk about cellular respiration. There are two kinds, aerobic and anaerobic. If you think of aerobic, meaning that there's air or oxygen involved, and anaerobic, meaning that there's no air, and meaning not, or oxygen involved. Anaerobic respiration happens in your muscles sometimes. So let's go ahead and start the discussion. Cellular respiration is the process by which the energy of glucose, remember that is a sugar that was formed in photosynthesis, is released in the cell to be used for life processes such as movement, breathing, blood circulation, any type of activity that your body has. Cells require a constant source of energy for life processes, but keep only a small amount of ATP on hand. Cells can regenerate ATP as needed by using the energy stored in foods like glucose, and also the glucose that is made in the plants. The energy stored in glucose by photosynthesis is released by cellular respiration and repackaged into the energy of ATP. So, think about photosynthesis and cellular respiration being opposite processes. Photosynthesis is going to build up the glucose, and cellular respiration is going to break down the glucose. What happens is you get light energy from the ecosystem. It goes into the photosynthesis or the chloroplast. You make the organic molecules and the glucose. It then goes into the mitochondria. Now remember, you and I don't have chloroplast, but we have mitochondria. Plants have both chloroplast and mitochondria. So what happens is their glucose goes into this process in the mitochondria where the ATP is given off. And remember that in addition to the ATP, carbon dioxide and water is given off. As I said, respiration occurs in all cells and can take place either with or without oxygen present. If you look, there is this organelle. Remember, eukaryotic cells have organelles called a mitochondria. And the organelle sort of looks like it has folds in it. And it can take place either with or without oxygen. Remember, with oxygen is called aerobic and without oxygen is called anaerobic. Aerobic respiration, as I said, requires oxygen. It occurs in the mitochondria. And when we are finished, you get a total of 36 ATP molecules produced. That's a lot of energy. The general formula for aerobic respiration is C6H12O6 plus 6O2 yields 6CO2 plus 6H2O plus 36 ATP. Now, notice something here. If you put the photosynthesis formula underneath this, you will find that all you have done is switched the products with the reactants and the reactants with the products. So it is the exact opposite. The only thing we are adding is 36 ATP. So remember, I told you to memorize the formula for photosynthesis. If you remember, pardon me, if you remember that, all you have to do is a simple flip for respiration. Glucose plus oxygen yields carbon dioxide plus water plus energy. And a simple diagram again. Not quite as simple. Basically, you have glucose, and what happens is it undergoes the process of glycolysis. In glycolysis, you convert glucose to 2 ATP. And that occurs in the cytoplasm in the mitochondria. Then you go to the Krebs cycle, and during the Krebs cycle, you also convert to ATP. Occurs in the mitochondria. And then finally, you go through the electron transport chain, and this is where you get the most bang for your buck. You receive 32 ATP while you do the electron transport chain. And again, this occurs in the mitochondria. So in summary, there are 3 steps. First is glycolysis, And in glycolysis, it happens in the cytoplasm, and you receive 2 ATP. Second is the Krebs cycle, happens in the mitochondria. Again, you get 2 ATP. And last but not least, the most bang for your buck, you get the electron transport chain, which again occurs in the mitochondria, and you get 32 ATP. Now, let's talk about anaerobic respiration. This occurs when no oxygen is available to the cell. And there are 2 types, alcoholic and lactic acid. You are familiar with alcoholic because you certainly made bread or heard about the beer and wine fermentation. And that is what it's also called. Anaerobic respiration is also called fermentation. Much less ATP is produced than in aerobic respiration, so it's not as efficient. Alcoholic fermentation occurs in bacteria and yeast. Process used in the baking and brewing yeast industry. Yeast produces carbon dioxide gas during fermentation to make dough rise and give bread its holes. So, glucose, pardon me, an anaerobic respiration gives you ethyl alcohol plus carbon dioxide plus 2 ATP. Now, lactic acid fermentation occurs in your muscle cells. You've had muscle cramps before, and this is why it occurs. Lactic acid is produced in the muscles during rapid exercise when the body cannot supply enough oxygen to the tissues, causing burning sensation in muscles. So in this procedure, glucose yields lactic acid plus carbon dioxide plus 2 ATP, as opposed to the 36 that we had before. First step in anaerobic respiration is also glycolysis. But what happens is you get either alcoholic fermentation, which yields 2 ATP, or lactic acid fermentation, which again yields ATP, versus the 36 that happens once we get through aerobic respiration. And that is the end of cellular respiration. Talk to you later when we talk about animals.